Throughout, hi, my name's McKinley Powell. Throughout our class, Child Growth and Learning, I did my project on child observations. I observed 3 children named Sherry, Mike, and Lake at the Goddard School did each student for about 30 minutes each week at the beginning, and then closer to the end did about an hour for each student each week. I did a total of 6 observations. When I started the observations, the children were 19 months old and now they're 21 months old. The topic I focused on for these observations was the children's social emotional development, and I really wanted to focus on the factors in the students' lives that might delay or progress their social emotional skills. I've always been interested in social emotional learning. When I very first started working at the age of 15, I worked in a low-income child care facility, and now I work in a private daycare facility that is quite expensive. And I've really noticed how big of a gap there is between the two workplaces. So that's really what started my curiosity when it comes to their social emotional development. In the future, I plan on getting my master's degree in social work and working with children and families, focusing on therapy. These observations have helped me understand what factors affect social emotional development. The purpose of these child observations was to observe what factors might play a role in a student's social emotional development, and then to further explore that one big question of social emotional development. Also focused on smaller questions like, does class play a role? Does gender play a role? Does schooling play a role in social emotional development? So I just looked at a bunch of different factors that might impact a student's development. Before I started my observations, I reviewed literature from the National Library of Medicine that focused on core components of evidence-based social emotional learning. The article focused on 3 barriers to social emotional learning, which were an individual level of barriers, the school level for barriers, and macro levels. For the process, I basically, like I said, I spent 30 minutes with the students each week, and I observed them during their free play time, their group activities, and their individual activities, and basically just wrote down what I noticed. I also followed the CDC's guidelines for social emotional milestones as I collected my data. Overall, I did notice a lot of development in my 3 students, and then I noticed some things that might be hindering them from developing, such as class for one family, and then another family is how long the parents are at work, and then medical issues is another one that I noticed for my students. Overall, I feel like I learned a lot from observing these 3 students when it comes to their social emotional development. I really, like I said, did notice that factors affected how they were developing when it comes to medical issues. That's not something I had thought about before, but I did have students that needed tubes, and so their whole life they weren't hearing properly. They were constantly sick, and that's a factor that affected her social emotional development that I hadn't thought about or necessarily understood until now. Another thing is with the family working, one of my students' family has extended hours at work, and so with parents always being at work, the students not getting worked on with one-on-one a whole lot. I also noticed how important it is like schooling wise, what students are being taught at school and how schools are working with students to develop their social emotional skills. Even though all three of these students went to the same school, I did have that past experience at a different school and could definitely tell like the difference and how important it is for students to be taught social emotional skills at school. I do think that this project will carry over into my professional future. It's helped me see like the vital factors in development. Like I said, I plan to be a social work major and work with families and children. This information will assist me in my future endeavors, so I understand what is needed to help other families.